like to introduce our next speaker, which is Charles Raison. When I was researching Moody Bitches, I really went down a rabbit hole when I was learning about inflammation, and I called Chuck to help me understand it all. And we had a really great conversation. I was very impressed with the way he was able to convey information, and a few years later, I was happy enough to recommend to Kevin that he come speak here because he had done a not-so-lateral move from the world of inflammation to the world of psychedelics. He is now the Director of Clinical and Translational Research at the Usona Institute, and he's a Professor of Psychiatry and Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is a very hip place to be these days. Dr. Raison, take it away.
Good.
Oh, wait, you have somebody with you. I'm sorry, I thought you were going separately. Tura Patterson is a Senior Director, Strategic Partnerships at Usona Institute. Tura Patterson, Charles Raison, the Usona Open Science Approach to Drug Development.
Thank you.
So amazing to have a picture of Abraham Lincoln on the wall. Did you all see that? He came and talked here in 1860, right at the start of the Civil War. It must have been quite a speech to hear. So can everybody hear me? I can't. Yes? Okay, good. All right, so Tura and I are going to kind of tag team this. I'll start out, and we got to pass this thing back and forth. Very happy to be here, very happy to talk a little bit about Usona and say some of the same things that have been said already, but to say them through the Usona lens. So what we're going to do is talk about who we are, what's open science. I'm actually going to give you a couple of examples of the sorts of activities that our open science approach is allowing other researchers to do. And then we're going to talk a little bit about building capacity, enabling access, and then Tura will talk about Porta Sofia. So, Usona Institute, who we are. I guess I'm going to come over here. The monitor is dead, so it makes us kind of drift over this way. So, Usona is an interesting beast because it's a pharmaceutical development company, but it's also a nonprofit medical research organization. And there are very, very specific sort of strictures on what a medical research organization can do and be. And one of those is that we have this really interesting prime mandate. You know, like if you're as old as me, you remember Star Trek. Remember they had like a prime directive, don't mess up other planets, right? Our prime directive is that we have to serve the public good in the mental health space. And this really, you know, it's not, the prime directive is not to make profit. The prime directive is not to, you know, give return on investment to shareholders. It really is that we have to figure out how can we, given who we are, optimally serve the public good in mental health. And for us, that's the study and development of psychedelic agents for mental illness and doing it on an open science research model. So, what is an open science research model? Well, we can see it up here. At its broadest, it's to allow scientific information, data, and outputs to be more widely accessible, so open access, and more reliably harness open data with the active engagement of all stakeholders. What does this mean specifically for Usona? These are the, there we go. Oops. Sorry, guys. These are the ways that we put this into practice. And in doing this, I really want to call out Bob Jesse. He was back, hiding out there in the back somewhere. He really has been such a leader in this field overall. If you understand the developments over the last 20 years, he has somehow, oh, there he is. Quietly been at the center of all things good and beautiful in this space. So, intellectual and scientific integrity. So we report the truth as we find it, meaning that we don't embellish findings, we don't sugarcoat findings. We report them as scientifically responsible as possible. In service, so we place the common good above private gain. And again, by mandate, our organization cannot be about private gain. It really is about serving the public good. If we fail in that, we fail in what our, you know, official mandate is. Open science and open practice, we will not withhold or require others to withhold materials or knowledge for commercial advantage. So that means that, you know, we don't try to lock in data. So much has been said about this already this morning, but that we firmly stand on that side of the equation. And non-interference, that we will place our discoveries into the public domain. So rather than holding back, you know what often happens in pharmaceutical endeavors is findings will be held back for quite a while because there's patent issues, there's reasons why people don't want it out in the public where it could be accessed by other people. We do not do that. So, Tura, let me turn to you.
I think this is working.
It is.
Good morning. So dropping back into where Leah left us yesterday, we're going to talk about what it feels like to be open science at Usona Institute, and a few examples and case studies we'll share with you. One of the things that we're doing at Usona Institute is publishing our scientific discoveries and research into the public realm. We offer our investigators brochure through a Creative Commons license to basically expand the range of creative works that can be shared legally. We are also working on developing a prior art library, which is a searchable tool, and we'll share more with you about that. And we offer an investigational drug supply program to enable clinical and other preclinical studies to move forward and advance this work. Examples of publications include our synthesis that our medicinal chemists have been working on for psilocybin, 5-MeO-DMT, and other discoveries related to our work in the lab. In fact, a couple of these have been noted as the most read in scientific publications in the past year. Our investigators brochure for psilocybin is offered online, and it's offered under a Creative Commons license so that other institutions that are pursuing clinical or non-clinical research with psilocybin can use this data and be able to basically leverage the work that we have done. We continue to update it on a regular basis. Our investigational drug supply program is one that is gaining increasing interest. Just in the past year, we have received over 50 applications, and in its time since the launch of the program, received almost 120 applications over 18 countries. To date, we have fulfilled about 20, actually just in the past year, we have enabled about 20 clinical trials to proceed, and that is with the use of our GMP psilocybin, pharmaceutical grade psilocybin. What this is representing is what we've talked a lot about at this event, is truly the emergence of a global network. Usona Institute sees itself as a node in this network. It's a number of emerging academic, commercial, and nonprofit centers around the world that are pursuing research in the psychedelic sciences. Some of these are in the early stages, some are advancing clinical studies in a number of indications, and some are very importantly looking at delivery of care and different therapeutic models. We'd like to talk about some case studies because we think it's really important to understand the exponential impact of some of this research. So Chuck is going to dive a little deeper into the clinical and scientific impact of several of our creative partnerships that we're very pleased and honored to be supporting through our investigational drug supply program.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it's, as a researcher myself, it's such an interesting thing to see these requests come in and to look at what's going on around the world. And one of the great advantages of this open science approach and this commitment to making psilocybin currently available is it allows academic researchers to begin to plumb areas that are either maybe not ready for commercial development or that might inform commercial development someday but are really more, like more of a basic science, to ask a whole bunch of questions that wouldn't happen if all that was happening in this field were straight ahead FDA type studies to seek approval. So what I'd like to do is actually give you an example of some studies that we are either funding, or not funding, but either providing psilocybin for or going to provide psilocybin for. So this is a study that Robin Card-Harris is putting together at the University of California, San Francisco. So he's given me permission to talk about it, sent us this really fascinating protocol. And so, let's think about one of the great questions that's come up again and again is, how much of it is drug? How much of it is set and setting? How much of it is a synergy between those two? And what do we mean by set and setting? How can we optimize set and setting if indeed it turns out that is this key element as most of us think it is, how can we to grab onto that to enhance therapeutic outcomes? So, of course, a lot of people are interested in looking at this, and Robin has got a study that has applied for drug from us that's very, very interesting. It's a study in healthy volunteers, so these are not people that have a clinical psychiatric condition, and the outcome is therefore not something like stopping addiction or stopping depression, it's well-being. Because, there are now fairly robust data sets showing that if you take folks that are not in a clinical state and give them a high-dose psychedelic experience, many of them will report significantly enhanced well-being afterwards, because we all know that you don't have to be clinically depressed to not have maximal well-being. So there's room for all of us to go up. And the idea behind this study is actually to look specifically at aspects of the setting, music, smell, sight, sound, to see if the setting can be optimized in these really interesting ways. And the design is 4 groups, and so half the people get the drug, half the people get placebo, and then half the people that get the drug get this enriched setting context, half get a much more pared down setting context, and the same thing with the folks in the placebo condition. And so you can see that there's a number of really interesting questions you could ask here. You can ask, does the drug work better than placebo overall? How much does the context matter? And the prediction is that that enrichment of context will be disproportionately beneficial when paired with active psilocybin, right? So this is a beautiful study, and again, an example of something that if the FDA does not say specifically, you must do a study to figure out how you can optimize the setting, is not very likely to happen from a drug development point of view, but then becomes hugely important as we begin to understand, as Joe was talking about, how to optimize the eventual use of these agents in clinical care. And then this, I must say, this has probably been the most entertaining thing personally that's happened to me this year. Texas, well known as a bastion of liberal thought. I love Texas, actually. I lived there years ago. Texas has taken the lead in state-mandated funding for psychedelic work. Unbelievable. So more unbelievable is I'm at a Usona meeting, and this guy walks in that I recognize from TV named Rick Perry. Now, Rick Perry and Chuck Raison have very, very different political views. My friends from Texas wanted to create a cocktail called the Perry Raison, sort of a tequila mix of like opposite stuff. So Rick Perry described himself that day as a knuckle-dragging, hardcore conservative. That's literally what he said. In person, he was unbelievably charming. You don't get to be like that without just, mesmerizing the room. But the thing he said I thought that was really powerful, he said, this is not about politics. And he told this story about how a special ops guy, well, let me back up. When he was governor, Rick Perry sent out sort of a form letter saying, to these folks, if you're ever around, come knock on our door. And apparently one of these folks did knock on the door, and he was horribly traumatized, and he moved into the governor's mansion. And Rick Perry tried to help this guy for a number of years, and he saw that the system didn't work. It was broken. The guy wasn't getting any better. And by hook or crook, eventually that sort of PTSD ex-warrior guy got down to Mexico, got treatment with, I believe, ibogaine and 5-MeO, and had this profound transformation. And Rick Perry goes, wow. And so he teamed up with the folks in Texas, and they actually got this through the legislature. And so there's going to be a state-funded study of psilocybin for PTSD. So why is this important? Well, it's important because of the things we're talking about, that the bill had widespread bipartisan support, which is amazing, and to me, extremely hopeful. It's a public-private collaboration. The site of doing it is coming out of Baylor University in Houston. And this is also really interesting. So, if we think about what I said about Robin's study, like how do you optimize setting, there's an analogous question in terms of the drugs themselves, which is, do all psychedelics work for all conditions? Do some psychedelics work better for some conditions than others? would combining psychedelics actually enhance outcome? And how would you do that? Well, we don't know, right? It's really interesting. So the opportunity to look at psilocybin for PTSD is really important, right? It opens up a door, ahead of like pharmaceutical pursuits of this to see is there a signal there and what does that signal look like? So in a bunch of ways, this is just a classic example of a study that we are supporting with product that is really going to move things forward. And then on a more personal note, that's me, not on my best hair day. And, if you think about what we're talking about the power of set and setting, there's something underneath that, which is an assumption that's not always articulated, specifically, but it is that the conscious awareness of that set and setting must be important, right? If you are not aware that you were in the set and setting, if you were not aware that you had a psychedelic experience in that set and setting, what would happen? What does that mean? What, in fact, is the role of conscious experience in the therapeutically transformative ability of psychedelics? And I suspect that almost all of us in this room would believe that the experience induced by psychedelics is key to their ability to help to treat symptoms and heal people of their mental illnesses. And people thought I'm kind of brain dead for actually wanting to test that. But science is a funny thing. Things can be really, really surprising. And, so we have set out in an attempt to actually look at the role of conscious experience in the effect of psilocybin on well-being by co-administering it with an agent called midazolam, which at appropriate doses keeps you awake, you're functioning, but you don't have memory afterwards. And so we're trying to look at how important is memory of the experience for its ability to produce long-term benefits. And this is really important clinically because, one of the things that we hear from folks who have done these studies is that sometimes when people begin to lose the therapeutic benefit, they will also say, I can remember the experience, but I no longer feel it in my body. I've lost that embodied sense. So trying to understand what is that embodied sense, how relevant is it, and then to use that to then leverage off and say, well, how can we extend that embodied sense? How can we deepen it? Become really, really directly relevant for clinical practice and for how we use these agents in clinical care. But, it's kind of a wild study. It's on the fringe a little bit, and it's not the kind of thing that, again, would fall within the line of a simple drug development program, but is hugely interesting, I think, to those of us that are interested in consciousness and the causal nature of consciousness in human healing. So, let me turn it back to you.
Okay. So these are a couple of examples on how an open science practice actually can extend our mission potentially exponentially outside of what we're doing with our own clinical development programs, and really much more than we could afford to do. This is really important to our donors and to many of our supporters, is that what is happening here is that we're exploring other therapeutic indications, and in some cases going more into the basics of the science and understanding the mechanisms of action or tools of consciousness for better understanding consciousness. I know at this event we've spoken about, in particular yesterday at the clinical discussion, understanding what the kind of therapeutic potential exists for several of these indications that are on the list, including addiction and headaches and pain disorders, eating disorders, PTSD, and tobacco cessation, just to name a few that we've discussed. So this is actually really about enabling access. This is about enabling access and innovation. And how are we going to sustain that? Well, first of all, our CMC, Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls Group, has been hard at work in scaling up manufacturing. And essentially that is to enable this drug to be produced at commercial scale, at repeatable quality, and at an affordable price, safely to the people who are most in need. So we're moving from small-scale manufacturing to kilo-scale manufacturing, and now into large-scale manufacturing, essentially being able to supply the world with GMP psilocybin upon approval. Thank you. Thank you. And with all humility, we are also really importantly thinking about innovation. And Graham really set the foundation this morning to understand what it means to protect innovation and protect the public domain from bad patents or overly reaching patents that essentially would exclude others from entering the market. So not just Usona and our work, but from other organizations that are also trying to move the field forward most honorably and efficiently. So Usona has worked with another organization that is called Porta Sophia, Gateway to Wisdom. Porta Sophia is an affiliate of Usona Institute. It is its own nonprofit. And it exists basically to protect the public domain, to support good patents, and to assure that patent reviewers, innovators, commercial organizations, and the public have access to relevant prior art in the field of psychedelics. You can access, thank you very much, you can access Porta Sophia at the website listed above. You can use it as a search tool, and you can also play a role in contributing. Contributing in the sense of prior art and other information that you might have. It's showing up today in a number of media publications. Graham mentioned it this morning, and I think it's gaining a lot of attention. We were interested in sharing with you today a short video clip of one of the founders, who's David Casimir, who's in the picture up here, an IP attorney, to share more about what Sophia is doing today, why it was established, how it works, and a very specific and very interesting case study of a recent example of an overly reaching broad patent claim that their group has been working on. We're not going to share the video with you today. What we will do, however, is in about 15 minutes, it will be posted online at Usona Institute's Twitter account, also on LinkedIn, and you could also access it at the link below, and hear from David personally about the work that Porta Sophia is doing. Porta Sophia and Usona Institute are both nonprofits. So the work that we're doing today would not be possible if it weren't for the generous support of our donors and collaborating organizations. This is truly a community effort. We are all about creative collaborations, so we welcome you to reach out and contact us. And want to thank very much the whole team here at Horizons for convening us for these really important conversations. Thank you very much.
Line up for questions. Please take.
Slide over here, or should we sit down?
If anybody has questions for Dr. Raison or Tura Patterson of Usona about open science or anything else, please get ready to be wrangled. Are you ready, or should I vamp for a minute?
Vamp.
I'm vamping. No, I have questions prepared just in case this happens. Are either of you comfortable talking more, maybe specifically about anti-competitive practices, what it means to be anti-competitive, and how open science prevents that to some degree? We're not naming names, or we can, but I just want to maybe understand a little more, what's going on.
We deliberately created the video so that you could hear really from the expert. I highly suggest that you watch the video and hear from David Casimir on that point. He's really the expert in the field and is taking on very specifically some anti-competitive practices. So I think that's the best source to go to.
Well, I'm Bellevue Doc at Twitter. If you tag me, I'll be sure to watch it and spread the word.
Thank you.
That also obviates my next question. Are we ready? I had a follow-up, but it's okay.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to ask this follow-up question to Usona, who possibly could be a supplier for RTT if the Ninth Circuit rules that the DEA must create an access pathway to that investigational drug. So I'd love to know if the court sanctions that, if Usona will consider that.
Is that Catherine?
It is
Hi,
Catherine Tucker
Catherine.
with the Merge Law Group. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for asking that. We have taken a look at it, and I think consistent with what we've heard from other individuals on panels today is that right now it does not look like the best pathway for us to consider being able to bring this out prior to approval. We have been advised to take a closer look at expanded access And we are talking with a number of organizations and our regulatory advisors to consider opportunities for expanded access.
Hey, I'm just remembering at the end of the day, we have all the speakers up, so if you didn't get a chance to ask your question because I shooed you away, you'll have another chance at the end. What's our next question, please?
Oh, hi. We've heard a lot about sort of bad, useless patents today, and I'm sort of curious what the prospects are for good, useful patents, particularly in areas like, if you look at benzodiazepines, I'm in mental health, many of them kind of do the same thing but have different half-lives. If you give Klonopin, it's going to last a long time. If you give Xanax, it'll last a few hours, that kind of thing. It would be neat to have like an ayahuasca that doesn't make you throw up, or to have a, yeah, I'm getting to the point, sorry.
I'm with you on
a
that,
mescaline that doesn't last 15 hours. Is this coming in the future, or is this sort of research happening and developing these sort of
Yeah,
substances?
I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, I think that one of the places, one of the reasons why we feel that good patents are good things is exactly that. So, one of the movements afoot right now is to identify agents that are either built from psychedelics or look like psychedelics, but have very different properties, right? And so, I mean, one of the kind of holy grails, I think, of some of the larger pharma concerns that are coming into this space is, can they take a psychedelic molecule, tweak it in some way that you get rid of the psychedelic experience, but you get a magic cure from your depression, right? This is really going on. Well, that may or may not be possible, right?
But that may or may not be holy.
Right, but it will be done if it can be done, right? And so if somebody creates like a new molecule like that, yeah, I think our position would be that that is a very appropriate place for a patent, because it truly is something new in the world. Whether, what we think about it's another issue. But I think, and Tura, you could jump in if you,
I will.
but I think our position is that these heritage molecules are clearly in the public space.
And that's also specifically why Porta Sophia was created, to really enable good patents to move forward and to do it in a way that's accessible and convenient, and provides actually a very useful tool to the patent reviewers.
Yeah, so if people are looking for a patent, it's a resource, right?
Exactly.
To see, is this patentable?
Exactly.
Is it worth pursuing this?
Yeah.
So, and that's portasophia.org. And just another quick answer to this question is like, yes, everybody is looking at all that. I've seen like 100 decks in the past year and a half. And everybody is looking to make something longer, shorter, or different to carve out their little piece of IP. And some of these things I think will have tremendous practicality and usefulness in the field of psychiatry. And some of them may look a little unholy, but in theory there should be space for everybody. I just want people to play nicely. And open source is a great strategy, and anti-patent is also a great strategy. And we have to reinvent things a little bit to make them a little bit more psychedelic and communal, I think. Next question, please.
Hi, my name is Julian. I go to University of Texas, Arlington. Really excited about the work going on in Texas. That was a very encouraging topic that you talked about. My question for you, while we're on the topic of accessibility, is how do we, or if you are aware of any programs onboarding undergraduates or including the younger generation that's going to be taking on the mantle after in the coming decades? Yeah,
well, we can speak a little bit. So yeah, the interest is huge. It's so interesting how much. So one of the hats I wear, I have this professorship at the University of Wisconsin, and every week I get multiple emails from undergrads saying, "How can I get involved? How can I get involved?" And it's frustrating for me because, of course, you have to have large-scale opportunities. Now, at the University of Wisconsin, we've started a center for the study of these substances, and one of the interesting things we've done is set up a master's program for training in psychedelic research work and psychedelic work in general. So that's an area, it's not for undergraduates specifically, but for undergraduates interested in then going into something, that's this sort of really unique opportunity. But this is a major challenge, and again, I see it from undergraduates all the way up through psychiatry residents. My mentor started complaining several years ago that all the top, smartest psych residents were wanting to do psychedelics and were departing for psychedelic land. And so finding space for this interest I was encouraged that it's going to take like 500 million therapists. There was that slide about 15% of the, because I think about 15% of people in mental health are really wanting to go into this area. So it's a challenge, but it's really cool too that there's such an interest and such a need to get people thinking about this early on in their education.
Absolutely.
I'll comment very quickly the slide that I shared on emerging centers globally. Usona Institute has partnered with some of them. There's also inter-collaboration among these centers. And we do provide scholarships and grants and find creative ways of partnering with academic organizations to also explore more diverse areas of interest. So, indigenous practices, also looking at ecological impacts, looking at the economics and public health and global health impacts of the work that we're doing. So I think there's truly an exciting area of growth at a number of institutions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question? Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Brigham. I'm a researcher at the National Institute of Neurology in Mexico City. And I was just wondering, are they doing any research, or are you doing any research to connect with any institutes there? And I'm thinking that psilocybin would be easier to get IRBs with than MDMA, because MDMA is based on amphetamine, or DMT, or what other, are there some places in Mexico doing research currently?
Are you aware of any specific research and collaborations in Mexico? I don't recognize your institution offhand, but as I mentioned, we have about 120 applications in. But we're happy to talk with you if you're interested in initiating a study. We do have some collaborations with other projects and researchers in Mexico. But again, very happy. Please feel free to reach out directly to me or go online to our website, and we have a section called our Investigational Drug Supply Program where we could review your application.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Well, fascinating work we're supporting in Sonora with the Yaqui Indians. They're building a health center that will be kind of focused on psychedelic treatments for mental issues in indigenous populations.
That has public support.
Yeah.
So you're right on, I
Yeah.
think, about that there's great interest there.
Yep.
Okay, when I said one more, I meant one more now. But really, that's it.
Hi, it's Jeannie Fontana. Thank you. I wanted to acknowledge you and applaud you for your efforts that you're doing at the Usona Institute. And I acknowledge that we've been hearing from many organizations that seemingly are doing similar projects. And I'm wondering if there's like MAPS even, the people who just spoke earlier. Is there any organization, any discussion over coming together and working together so that the Venn diagram is not so overlapping?
I would say, first of all, we do have a number of collaborations with other organizations that have spoken. I think we each have our own differentiators in terms of what exactly we're doing. So as Chuck started off today, essentially we're a drug development company. We are a nonprofit. We work collaboratively. We're working to enable the field. We don't necessarily specialize. For example, MAPS is focused on their primary clinical development program is focused on MDMA for PTSD. Our primary and first clinical development program is psilocybin for the treatment of major depressive disorder, which we do have breakthrough therapy designation for as well. So that requires a lot of time and investment and infrastructure and focus of our team. So what we do is we stay in touch with other organizations, especially MAPS. We've been good friends for years. We offer each other lessons learned. We're grateful for the path that they've been paving for all of us. But other than that, I think it's important that we do stay focused on areas where we can be most effective with the resources that we have.
Yeah, and I think this really highlights how important it is just that the various entities don't try to block each other, step on each other, impede each other, because there can actually be a better economy of scale with us, the different organizations, really focusing on specific areas where they've generated resources and expertise, where they don't have to be, no one organization has to be all things to all folks. But again, this is the beautiful thing, and again, just kudos to Bob Jesse for launching this, with this idea of open science, where it allows this sort of collaborative, multimodal kind of way of moving forward.
Same team, right? A lot of us have the same goals, and we're going about it in a lot of different ways. So I agree, it's very important for everybody to communicate and stay appraised of what other people are doing. hence the open in open science. Also, I think there's a real benefit to any data that we can pool. We'll have more power if we have similar outcome measurements or using a similar drug, same dosage. You could pool your data, have more power. That's something I hope that we will be doing because there's sort of an economy of scale that happens in those situations. All right, we thank you very, very much for coming to Horizons. Very pleased to make it. We'll see you at the end.